welcome to Next Gen PA. My name is Samuel Pimentel, and I'm joined today by my co-hosts.
Mohammed Abdul.
And Anish Koka.
As we all know, it's summertime right now. We got warm sun, heat waves, no school, and it's time for summer internships. Now, this podcast in particular is affiliated with the World Affairs Council of Harrisburg, which itself is hosting a summer internship. And today we are proud to have our interns here to discuss the topic of food insecurity in the United States. Now, unfortunately, it's an issue which affects too many people in this country, as they can either not afford to buy food or live in places which do not have access to food. And those issues, along with others contributing to food insecurity, is what we're here today to discuss. Now, I'm very happy to have you both on the podcast today. And I guess I'm just going to ask a simple kind of clarifying question of what is food insecurity and really what do we need to know about it?
The U.S. Department of Agriculture monitors food security in the U.S. And while majority of the U.S. households have access to food security, a minority doesn't, meaning that at some times in the year, households experience lack of access to food and healthy living due to food resources. Often causes are income and other resources that may affect access to food during a certain period in the year. And talking about minority, it's actually 12.8% of those US households that doesn't have access to food security throughout the entire year, which represent 17 million of US households, which for me is a big number and can be considered as very important.
It really is a huge number. I mean, in a country of, we're about, I'd say 300 million, 10%, that's what, 30 million people, I believe? Yes, 30 million people. That's 30 million people who don't have access to food. And unfortunately, there's a lot of conditions which go around that. So I actually want to take this question sort of back to where food starts, and that's agriculture. And well, what's really going on with the agricultural side of things that's leading to food insecurity?
Yeah, as you said, agriculture is a big part of food insecurity. And while it may not be the intention of farmers around the USA to make food less available to the people of the USA, it does happen a lot. 70% of respondents reported that small land size and low crop yield had a big effect on food security. Farmers themselves have a hard time finding land that they can fertilize properly and grow enough crops to sell. Farmers themselves struggle to grow enough crops, and when they struggle, they have to bump up the prices to make a profit. And sometimes that can lead to people with lower incomes not being able to buy the crops. And businesses can go bankrupt because they can't buy the crops, and people, individual buyers, will be starving because they can't find anywhere with a good price.
Wow. I mean, and that's the thing too, is we have to think about is really what our farmers are dealing with. Unfortunately, the land they've been using this, sometimes these are farms that have been passed down to generations. A lot of stuff's grown there, and the soil just doesn't become as good after a while, which is unfortunate as it leads to less growth. And also, something interesting I found online is that about a quarter of our farmers are in debt. A quarter of farmers are in debt. Now think about that. That means 1/4 of where our food comes from is from people who are barely affording to keep that institution which is growing the food sustainable. Now, I mean, that's a problem, and I haven't heard anything being done about that specifically. But I also, I guess, want to ask and open the floor to food insecurity again as a whole, and what is being done either in Pennsylvania or nationally to combat this issue?
So let me go back to this matter of agriculture. Uh, According to the US Department of Agriculture and looking at the graph, we've noticed a constant decrease in food insecurity since 2014. And that was in both food insecurity and very low food security, which is another level of food security experienced by 5.1% of the population. And one of the reasons to this increase of food insecurity is related to the end of the program called Farmers to Consumers in 2021, which leads to a significant increase in food insecurity and low food security in the US since 2022. Of course, one of the reasons is also income, which is really common in families below the poverty line, and 36.7% of those family below poverty line experience food insecurity. On the political side of the matter, the federal government in fiscal year 2022 has spent 183 billion adjusted for inflation for food insecurity, especially for SNAP, which is the largest program in the US. And also compared to 2021, we've noticed 1% decrease in those spending from the federal government, which is quite concerning since the rates for food insecurity in 2022 were higher compared to 2021, but in return, the spending were lower, which is quite concerning.
That is concerning. I mean, again, we have a lot of problems in this country, and I understand there are some which may be affecting more, but to spend less money on something affecting 30 million people, about 30 million people, is truly awful, and I don't think we should be letting that happen. Anish, do you have anything to say about this?
Yeah, I think this problem should be more prioritized in the government. I feel like as of today, there's so many people that are starving, and I feel like this should be a problem that should be better addressed compared to other problems because it's just like food is a big deal in the USA.
I mean, it really is a big problem, unfortunately. So the thing is, what I was reading is we know that in inner cities and places like that, there are food deserts, places where people just can't access food, even if they have the financial means to purchase food, they don't have access to food. Or I think a problem a lot of people aren't discussing is the type of food they have access to. Sure, if let's take downtown Harrisburg, for example, a bunch of great restaurants, absolutely amazing restaurants down there that are about 20 bucks a plate. No way you can sustain a family 20 bucks a plate every day. Or they have convenience marts. Now, what type of food is in these convenience marts? You ever been to Turkey Hill, or I guess Sheetz would be a bad example, so let's use Turkey Hill or 7-Eleven. It's soda, chips, maybe your frozen food, which has less nutrients than what you should be eating on a daily basis. So what we're having is people whose entire diets are being based off food, which is unhealthy for them. It's absolutely terrible. And I'm just curious if you guys have anything else to add about food deserts and places such as that.
Well, the supply for food is definitely being affected a lot, and that one of the reasons is this issue of climate change, which we've heard of a lot. Because from the farming process, it turns out climate change is affecting the crops and also uh, really what we're getting at the end. And the matter is caused by dry climate, uh, the weather, and a lot of issues affecting the symbiosis in between natural agents to receive a good food supply at the end of the year. And also, one of the reasons affecting food insecurity is state level policies. And here as specify state level policies, which is not federal, because according to the US Department of Agriculture, the discrepancy between states that had managed food insecurity is quite large. And that's first related to the economic conditions of the state and also what is being done in terms of policies in the state. Now, those rates varies from 6.2% in New Hampshire to 16.6 in Arkansas, which is quite a big gap in between those two states. And fortunately for Pennsylvania, we're below the US average for food insecurity, which is quite good.
That is good, but something you just mentioned, which I really want to emphasize, is you brought up the states of New Hampshire and Arkansas, which, if you know anything about these states, Arkansas is a very agriculturally based state. Now, how is it in an agriculture based state they have higher food insecurity? I mean, I know that there's a lot of poverty in Arkansas, which is very unfortunate, but the fact of the matter is that they are an agriculture based state, and despite the fact they are growing the crops there, people cannot get access to them, and that is honestly a crime against the people in the state of Arkansas. Now, Anish, I guess back to the agricultural point, is what do you think of how we're going to help farmers be able to combat this? How are we going to be able to help them to grow food and be able to get it at affordable prices so that people can stop dying and starving? I mean, how are we going to be able to stop that?
Well, I think the main issue here is the amount of money that's going around here. If you took an economics class before, there's businesses and households, right? It goes in between. The farmers in this case are businesses, and the households are the people who buy the food, right? So the businesses should be getting more money so they can produce more. But the thing about farmers is they don't get a high salary, and at the same time they don't really have much to start with, so they can't really like get a push off from like the beginning. I think what the government should do is they should set aside a certain grant for farmers in not only Arkansas but like the entire nation. Going back to Arkansas, they should be able to farmers should be able to get a stable farmland and have a good amount of money to like so that the prices can be lowered and they can still get a profit. The thing about farmers is they feel pressured to make the prices go up a little so they can make even a tiny profit so they can feed themselves. So if they got more money and if they like got a grant and if they were more stable, then I think the prices they wouldn't be so pressured to increase the prices and they would like make the prices a little more fair so they can still have profit, but it's still manageable for people of poverty.
And that's really, I think, kind of the crime in a way. Another part of the crime is if you, there should be nobody that denies that farming is an incredibly important job. I mean, it's how we eat, it's how we survive. And the fact of the matter is that we're letting these people who are helping to grow our food live in poverty themselves. I mean, they have an incredibly essential job, which I don't know how any nation, let alone one with 300 million people, could survive. So I definitely agree with your take on we need to be help subsidizing them, making sure that they can be more competitive and not have to overcharge on prices just so they can make sure that their family has food on the table. And I'm curious, I guess, to ask of how can we make sure that each state is going to be able to do their part in helping out not just our farmers, but the people suffering from this issue? What can each state or just the nation impose upon to help people?
Well, here's something. If the farmers themselves aren't supported good enough, then they tend to leave this area, and the US tend to export more food, which when we have comparative advantage on a certain product and we end up importing this product, turns out with a higher cost uh, than producing the food locally, which will also increase the pricing of the food. And also a big reason, like always, to food insecurity is really this matter of income. And there's a wide setup we can see: unemployment, and also, depending on the regions, are people willing to go and find a job and provide for themselves and their families? So there's a whole concept of this system, uh, which can provide people food or access to food throughout the year. Because we also have to see that food insecurity can happen at a certain point of the year, a specific point at the year. It doesn't have to be through the whole year, but we know unemployment happen and life circumstances can happen to impact food insecurity.
You mentioned something which I really didn't even think about until now. However, is you're right. If we can't grow food in our own country, we're going to have to import food, which in an emergency case or a case of desperation makes sense, but I would much rather, and I'm pretty sure most people would agree, I'd much rather get food from, say, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Virginia, somewhere a bit more local versus halfway across the world, as there's a lot of problems with that. One, you mentioned cost. Cost, it goes up having to ship, import, there's tariffs or anything like that that just raises the price of food. And also the quality of that food. I mean, you can't tell me that food from a farm 30 minutes away from Center City, Harrisburg, PA, or a farm 12-hour flight from Harrisburg, PA, you can't tell me the 12-hour flight food is going to be better. Now, to I guess bring a point to this, we talk a lot on this podcast about education and the value of it and helping people out with it. And I'm curious to get your guys' opinion on should we be incentivizing even more than we already are, incentivizing young people to become farmers, to become interested in agriculture. I know we have programs such as FFA, but what do you guys think? Do you think we should be taking that further to make sure that we are raising a great next generation of farmers? I'm curious to hear you guys' opinion on that.
I feel like far the advertisement when it comes to farming in local schools, districts, and even counties is very limited. And I feel like farming should be like seen as a legitimate career instead of just something that gives you food or just something that's there as an option. Farming should be considered as like up there with like something with a degree holder like a doctor or a lawyer, that they're just as important if not more. Farming should be more incorporated in schools lessons so that students can see it as more of an option.
I definitely agree with that. Mohammed, do you have anything to add to this?
Well, I think here's the thing: it either you create an incentive for people to go and farm to provide a good supply for the population, or you import food with a higher cost. So, of course, there's always this matter of comparative advantage on the food production, but same time, there's a lot going on in the farming industry with the US can also take advantage of, which is like creating employment for all those people, uh, which will generate income for themselves and same time providing a good supply for the US population. So I think there should be more programs to create incentives for more people to go into the field and yeah, help the economy and also the food supply.
Again, these are all just amazing points and things we should really be taking into consideration. I mean, I think it was Anish who mentioned lawyers and doctors, two very well-paying jobs and two very essential jobs. But the thing is, if there's no farmer, you're going to have to go to the doctor because you're sick, right? I mean, we take the doctor as essential, which I do definitely believe they are essential workers and should be honored as such. But we need that farmer to make sure that you have the food and the good quality food so you're not getting sick. And I really do think that we need to teach kids that this is a legitimate career path. This is a career path that is essential and rewarding and can put money in your pocket. Now, this has just been an absolutely amazing discussion, and I want to thank you both for being a part of it, as I think there's just so much to this topic that we need people to start acting on. We need to start having our legislatures, our senators, our people in the executive branch really paying attention to this issue of agriculture, food insecurity, food deserts. It's not going to get better. There's no future where if you do nothing and just hope and pray it's going to get better. It's not. And what we need to do is we need to be taking action. And I hope that more conversations like this start sprouting up across the country so we can finally take action into helping to stop the starvation going on. Thank you.
Next Gen PA is a podcast from the World Affairs Council of Harrisburg. For more information on the World Affairs Council of Harrisburg, visit our website at wacharrisburg.org.